The morning sun cast long shadows across the naval base as Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez stepped off the transport vehicle, her duffel bag slung over her shoulder and determination etched across her face. The salty ocean breeze carried with it the sounds of military life, boots marching in formation, helicopters overhead, and the distant echo of training exercises. This was Coronado Naval Base, home to some of the most elite warriors in the world, and Maria was about to become the first female intelligence specialist assigned to work directly with SEAL team operations. Maria had fought hard to earn this assignment. Her record spoke volumes, top of her class in intelligence analysis, fluent in 4 languages, and decorated for her service in Afghanistan where she had saved countless lives by intercepting enemy communications. Yet she knew that none of that would matter to some of the people she was about to work alongside. In their eyes, she would first and foremost be seen as a woman in a man's world. The administration building buzzed with activity as Maria completed her check-in procedures. Officers moved with purpose through the corridors, their conversations filled with tactical jargon and mission briefings. She could feel eyes following her as she navigated the unfamiliar hallways, some curious, others skeptical. Word traveled fast on a military base, and everyone knew about the new female addition to the intelligence unit. Commander James Mitchell, a stern man in his early 50s with graying temples and sharp blue eyes, welcomed Maria into his office. The walls were adorned with commendations, unit patches, and photographs from various deployments. Behind his desk, a large window offered a view of the training compound where she could see groups of men in fatigues running obstacle courses. Rodriguez, Commander Mitchell began, his voice carrying the authority of decades of military service. I want to be clear about something from the start. You're here because you're the best analyst we could get for this job, not because of any quota or political correctness. The men you'll be working with are professionals, but they're also human. Some will accept you immediately, others will need time to see what you can do. Your job is to prove yourself through your work, nothing else. Maria nodded, appreciating his directness. She had heard similar speeches before, but this time felt different. The weight of representing all women in such an environment wasn't lost on her. Every mistake would be magnified, every success scrutinized for authenticity. Her first week passed in a blur of briefings, security clearances, and familiarization with the base layout. The Intelligence Center became her primary workspace, a high-tech facility filled with multiple screens, satellite feeds, and secure communication equipment. Here, she analyzed threat assessments, monitored enemy communications, and provided real-time intelligence support for ongoing operations. The SEAL teams she supported were legends in their own right. Team Alpha was led by Lieutenant Commander Ryan Ghost Thompson, a decorated veteran with 15 years of service and more successful missions than most units completed in their entire existence. His team included some of the most skilled operators in the Navy, explosive experts, snipers, medics, and communications specialists who could operate in any environment from Arctic conditions to desert warfare. During her second week, Maria was invited to attend a mission briefing. The conference room filled with muscular, battle-hardened men who spoke in clipped, efficient sentences about tactics and contingencies. She took notes on her tablet, occasionally offering insights about enemy communication patterns she had identified. Her contributions were acknowledged with professional nods, but she could sense the underlying tension. She was an outsider in their brotherhood. The breakthrough came during a complex hostage rescue simulation. Intelligence indicated that enemy forces had captured 3 American contractors in a compound 60 miles inland. The rescue operation required precise timing and perfect intelligence coordination. Maria worked 18-hour days, mapping guard rotations, identifying communication frequencies, and creating detailed floor plans of the target building. When the simulated mission began, her real-time intelligence updates proved invaluable. She guided the team around patrol routes, warned them of unexpected guard movements, and provided critical information that allowed them to complete the rescue without casualties. As the exercise concluded, Lieutenant Commander Thompson approached her workstation. "Outstanding work, Rodriguez," he said, his usually stoic expression showing a hint of approval. "That was some of the best intel support we've received." The compliment carried weight coming from someone of his reputation and experience. Word of her performance spread through the SEAL community. Gradually, the initial skepticism began to fade as operators realized her value to their missions. She wasn't trying to be one of them, she was something different, something they needed. Her analytical mind and attention to detail complemented their tactical expertise perfectly. However, not everyone was ready to accept her presence. The base housed thousands of personnel from various units, and the integration of women into traditionally male roles remained a contentious issue. Some viewed her assignment as an unnecessary experiment that compromised unit cohesion. Others saw it as inevitable progress that the military needed to embrace. Maria's living quarters were in the female officer housing, a small building that felt isolated from the main personnel areas. Her evenings were often spent alone, reviewing intelligence reports or studying tactical manuals. The social aspects of military life that helped build unit cohesion remained largely closed to her. She wasn't invited to the informal gatherings where operators shared stories and built the personal relationships that translated into battlefield trust. The isolation was perhaps the most challenging aspect of her assignment. While her professional relationships were improving, the personal connections that made military service bearable remained elusive. She called her family regularly, drawing strength from conversations with her mother and younger sister who looked up to her as a trailblazer. During her third week, Maria volunteered for additional training that would enhance her ability to support SEAL operations. She enrolled in advanced combat medical training, tactical communication courses, and even basic survival instruction. The training was grueling, designed for operators who needed to function under extreme stress. Many of her instructors had never trained a female intelligence specialist before, and they pushed her hard to ensure she could meet the same standards expected of everyone else. The medical training proved particularly challenging. Learning to treat gunshot wounds, perform emergency surgery under field conditions, and manage battlefield trauma required both technical skill and emotional resilience. Maria discovered she had a natural aptitude for the work, her steady hands and analytical mind serving her well in high-pressure scenarios. Word of her additional training efforts reached the SEAL teams she supported. The fact that she was voluntarily subjecting herself to the same grueling instruction they had endured earned her additional respect. She wasn't content to remain safely in the intelligence center, she was preparing herself to be a more effective team member. One evening, while studying medical procedures in the base library, Maria was approached by Petty Officer First Class David Santos, a team medic with 8 years of SEAL experience. Santos was known for his dry humor and encyclopedic knowledge of military history. "Heard you're taking the advanced trauma course," Santos said, settling into the chair across from her. Most intel folks wouldn't bother with that level of medical training. Maria looked up from her textbook, surprised by the informal conversation. "I figure the more I understand about what you guys face in the field, the better I can support you from the intelligence side." Santos nodded approvingly. "That's solid thinking. Mind if I ask what made you want this assignment? Most people in your position would prefer a nice safe posting somewhere with air conditioning and regular hours." It was the first time anyone had asked about her motivations rather than her qualifications. Maria chose her words carefully. "I joined the military to serve my country and make a difference. This assignment lets me use my skills where they can have the biggest impact. These missions save lives, and if I can help make them more successful, then I'm exactly where I need to be." The conversation continued for nearly an hour, ranging from military history to shared experiences in Afghanistan. For the first time since arriving at Coronado, Maria felt like she was talking to a colleague rather than being evaluated as an experiment. Santos shared stories about his team's previous deployments, the challenges they faced, and the importance of reliable intelligence support. As their conversation wound down, Santos offered a piece of advice that would prove prophetic. "The teams you're supporting are good people, Rodriguez. They'll judge you on your performance, not your gender, but they need to see that you understand what's at stake. Show them you're committed to their success, and they'll move mountains for you." Maria's commitment would soon be tested in ways she never anticipated. Unknown to her, tensions were building among some of the junior enlisted personnel who viewed her presence as a threat to military tradition. These individuals, primarily recent recruits and personnel from support units, harbored resentments about changing policies and evolving military culture. The base dining facility, known as the Chow Hall, served as a social hub where different units mingled during meal times. Maria typically ate quickly and, quietly, reviewing intelligence reports on her tablet while grabbing a quick meal between briefings. She had grown accustomed to eating alone, using the time to stay current on global security situations that might affect upcoming missions. The atmosphere in the Chow Hall was always energetic, filled with the conversations of young service members discussing everything from sports to upcoming deployments. Maria had learned to tune out most of the background noise, focusing on her work while mechanically eating standard military fare. She rarely looked up from her tablet, preferring to avoid the stares and whispered comments that still occasionally followed her. What Maria didn't realize was that her professional success with the SEAL teams was creating unexpected consequences elsewhere on the base. Some individuals interpreted her achievements as validation of policies they disagreed with, while others saw her as a symbol of changes they couldn't accept. The resentment was building gradually, like pressure in a sealed container, waiting for the right moment to explode. The stage was being set for a confrontation that would test not only Maria's resolve but also reveal the true character of the elite warriors she supported. In the complex social dynamics of military life, respect had to be earned, loyalty had to be proven, and sometimes the most important battles were fought not on foreign battlefields but in the everyday spaces where service members lived and worked together. As Maria closed her medical textbook that evening and prepared for another challenging day, she had no idea that her dedication to serving alongside America's finest warriors would soon be put to the ultimate test. The bonds she had been carefully building with the SEAL community were about to be examined in a way that would define not just her career, but her very place in the military family she had worked so hard to join. #The confrontation. The fourth week of Maria's assignment began with an urgent mission briefing. Intelligence had identified a high-value target operating from a compound in Eastern Europe, and SEAL Team Alpha was tasked with conducting a capture operation. The mission required extensive planning, precise timing, and flawless intelligence coordination. Maria threw herself into the preparation with her characteristic intensity, working around the clock to ensure every detail was perfect. For 3 consecutive days, she barely left the intelligence center. Her workstation became command central for the operation, surrounded by monitors displaying satellite imagery, communication intercepts, and real-time surveillance feeds. She coordinated with multiple intelligence agencies, analyzed enemy movement patterns, and created comprehensive briefing materials for the assault team. Lieutenant Commander Thompson and his team relied heavily on her analysis during the planning phase. Every question about enemy capabilities, facility layouts, and potential complications was directed to Maria. Her responses were detailed, accurate, and delivered with the confidence that came from thorough preparation. The mutual respect between Maria and the SEAL operators had evolved into genuine professional admiration. The mission launched on a Thursday evening, with Maria providing real-time intelligence support from the operations center. For 8 hours, she monitored communications, tracked team movements, and provided critical updates that kept the operators one step ahead of enemy forces. When the target was successfully captured without casualties, the entire team knew that Maria's intelligence work had been instrumental in the victory. The celebration in the operations center was subdued but meaningful. Handshakes and quiet congratulations were exchanged as the team processed the successful completion of a complex mission. Lieutenant Commander Thompson approached Maria's workstation as she finished compiling the after-action intelligence report. "Rodriguez, that was exceptional work," Thompson said, his voice carrying genuine appreciation. "Your analysis made the difference between success and potential disaster. The intelligence picture you provided was the best we've ever had going into a mission like this." Maria felt a surge of professional pride, but, more importantly, she sensed that she had crossed an invisible threshold. The success of the mission had validated her presence in ways that no amount of training or credentials could have achieved. She wasn't just tolerated anymore, she was valued as an essential team member. However, her growing success with the elite special operations community was creating unintended consequences elsewhere on the base. The junior enlisted personnel in support roles watched her integration with the SEAL teams with increasing resentment. To them, she represented changes in military culture that they viewed as unnecessary and potentially damaging to unit cohesion. Seaman recruit Tyler Brooks was among the most vocal critics of evolving military policies. A 19-year-old from rural Alabama, Brooks had joined the Navy with traditional views about military service and clear ideas about gender roles. He struggled with academic subjects and had been assigned to food service after failing to qualify for more technical positions. The contrast between his struggles and Maria's obvious success created a festering sense of injustice in his mind. Brooks gathered like-minded individuals around him, creating an informal group of malcontents who shared grievances about military modernization. They met during off-duty hours, complaining about everything from revised training standards to changing promotion policies. Their conversations often focused on Maria as a symbol of what they perceived as the military's declining standards. "She's getting special treatment because she's a woman," Brooks would argue to anyone who would listen. "They're giving her assignments that should go to real soldiers who earned them through traditional service." His logic was flawed, but it resonated with individuals who felt left behind by an evolving military culture. The group included personnel from various support units, mechanics who maintained vehicles, clerks who processed paperwork, and food service workers who prepared meals for the base population. Most were junior enlisted personnel with limited military experience and even less understanding of special operations requirements. Their resentment was based on perception rather than reality, but it was no less dangerous for being misinformed. Friday afternoon brought the weekly all-hands briefing, where base personnel received updates on policies, upcoming exercises, and general information. Maria attended these briefings as required, usually sitting toward the back and listening to announcements that rarely affected her specialized assignment. The briefings were routine affairs, but this week's session included recognition for the successful mission completed by SEAL Team Alpha. Commander Mitchell took the podium to acknowledge the team's achievement, praising their professionalism and successful completion of a challenging operation. While he couldn't discuss mission details in an open forum, he made sure to highlight the importance of intelligence support in modern military operations. "Special operations success depends on exceptional intelligence analysis," Commander Mitchell announced to the assembled personnel. "This week's mission succeeded because our intelligence specialists provided the tactical advantage our operators needed. Excellence in support roles is just as critical as excellence in combat positions." Maria felt the weight of hundreds of eyes as personnel turned to locate her in the audience. Some faces showed professional respect, others displayed curiosity, but she also noticed darker expressions among certain groups. The recognition was professionally gratifying but socially isolating, marking her even more clearly as different from the majority of base personnel. After the briefing, Maria headed to the Chow hall for a late lunch. The successful mission had kept her working through normal mealtimes, and she was looking forward to a quiet moment to decompress from the intensity of the past week. She grabbed a tray and moved through the serving line, selecting a simple meal before finding an empty table in a corner where she could review some routine intelligence reports. The Chow hall was busier than usual, filled with personnel from the afternoon shift change. Conversations buzzed around topics ranging from weekend plans to upcoming training exercises. Maria settled into her routine of eating while working, her tablet propped against her water bottle as she scrolled through overnight intelligence summaries from various global hotspots. She was so focused on her reading that she didn't notice the group approaching her table until they were already standing nearby. Tyler Brooks led a group of 8 junior enlisted personnel, their body language deliberately intimidating as they formed a loose circle around her position. The conversations at nearby tables began to quiet as other diners sensed the developing confrontation. "Well, look who's eating alone again," Brooks said loudly enough for surrounding tables to hear. The special intelligence expert who thinks she's too good to eat with regular Navy personnel. His tone carried a mixture of sarcasm and hostility that made his intentions clear. Maria looked up from her tablet, immediately assessing the situation. Years of military training had taught her to recognize potential threats, and the positioning of the group around her table was clearly intended to intimidate. She remained seated, keeping her voice level and professional. "Good afternoon," she said simply, returning her attention to her tablet in hopes that ignoring the provocation would cause the group to lose interest and move away. "Don't ignore us when we're talking to you," said Petty Officer 3rd Class Marcus Webb, a mechanic with 2 years of service and a reputation for disciplinary problems. "We want to know what makes you so special that you get to work with the SEALs while real sailors get stuck in support jobs." The accusation was loaded with assumptions and resentments that had been building for weeks. Maria realized that this confrontation was about more than her specific assignment. It represented broader tensions about changing military culture and evolving gender roles in combat-adjacent positions. "My assignment is based on my qualifications and the needs of the mission," Maria replied, still keeping her voice calm and professional. "Just like everyone else's assignment on this base." She continued eating, refusing to be drawn into an argument that could only escalate the situation. Brooks moved closer to her table, his voice growing louder and more aggressive. "Qualifications? Right. The only qualification that matters is that you're a woman and they needed to fill some quota. Meanwhile, sailors with real experience get passed over for choice assignments." The allegation stung because it echoed doubts that Maria had faced throughout her career. Every achievement was questioned, every success attributed to factors other than her competence and dedication. She had learned to ignore such comments in most situations, but being surrounded by hostile personnel in a public setting made this confrontation particularly challenging. Other diners began paying closer attention to the developing scene. Some seemed uncomfortable with the aggressive tone, while others appeared to be waiting to see how the situation would unfold. The Chow Hall's normal atmosphere of casual conversation had been replaced by tension and expectation. "I earned my position the same way everyone else does," Maria said, finally, looking up to make eye contact with Brooks. "Through training, performance, and demonstrating competence in my assigned duties. If you have concerns about assignment policies, there are proper channels for addressing them." Her response was measured and appropriate, but it only seemed to fuel Brooks' anger. He had expected her to either back down or respond emotionally, and her professional composure frustrated his attempt to provoke a reaction that would justify further aggression. "Proper channels," Webb repeated mockingly. "That's what they always say when they don't want to address the real issues. You know what the real issue is? Standards are being lowered to accommodate people who don't belong in certain roles. It compromises mission effectiveness and puts people at risk." The accusation crossed a line that Maria couldn't ignore. Questioning her qualifications was one thing, but suggesting that her presence compromised mission effectiveness attacked the very core of her professional identity. She had worked too hard and sacrificed too much to allow such allegations to stand unchallenged. "My performance record speaks for itself," Maria said, rising from her seat to address the group more directly. "I've successfully supported multiple operations, and my intelligence analysis has contributed to mission success without casualties. If you want to discuss standards, we can compare our actual achievements rather than making accusations based on assumptions." The confrontation was escalating despite Maria's attempts to de-escalate through professional responses. Brooks and his supporters interpreted her willingness to defend herself as defiance that needed to be challenged more aggressively. The circle around her table tightened as additional personnel joined the group, drawn by the developing confrontation. "Achievements?" Brooks laughed harshly. "You sit in an air-conditioned room looking at computer screens while real warriors risk their lives in the field. That's not achievement, that's just doing a job that any competent analyst could handle. The only reason you're here is because they needed a token female to make their statistics look good." The personal attack was designed to humiliate Maria in front of her peers and undermine her credibility with the broader base population. Brooks had calculated that a public confrontation would either force her to back down, revealing weakness, or provoke an emotional response that would confirm his narrative about women being unsuitable for military service. Maria felt her anger rising but forced herself to maintain professional composure. She had faced similar situations before and knew that any emotional response would be used against her. The best defense was to continue demonstrating the professionalism that had earned her respect among the operators she supported. "I understand you may have concerns about changing policies," Maria said, addressing not just Brooks but the growing crowd of observers. "Those concerns should be addressed through proper channels with appropriate leadership. This kind of public confrontation serves no constructive purpose and reflects poorly on all of us." Her attempt to redirect the conversation toward proper procedures only intensified Brooks' frustration. He had invested too much in this confrontation to back down gracefully, and the presence of supporters made retreat impossible without losing face. The situation was approaching a point where de-escalation would require intervention from outside authority. The chow hall had become almost completely silent as personnel stopped eating to watch the confrontation unfold. Some diners looked uncomfortable with the aggressive tone, while others seemed to be choosing sides based on their own views about military integration policies. The tension in the room was palpable as everyone waited to see how the situation would resolve. Unknown to Maria and her antagonists, word of the confrontation was already spreading beyond the chow hall. Military bases were small communities where news traveled quickly, and a public challenge to one of their own would not go unnoticed by the SEAL community. The bonds of loyalty and mutual support that define special operations culture were about to be tested in ways that would surprise everyone involved. The stage was set for a confrontation that would reveal the true nature of military brotherhood and the strength of bonds forged through shared commitment to excellence and mission success. The confrontation in the chow hall had reached a critical point when Petty Officer First Class David Santos entered through the main entrance, returning from an afternoon training exercise. Santos immediately recognized the hostile body language surrounding Maria's table and quickly assessed the situation. Years of combat experience had taught him to read tension and identify potential threats, and what he saw developing around the intelligence specialist demanded immediate attention. Santos didn't hesitate. He pulled out his phone and sent a priority text message to his team leader, situation developing in Chow Hall. Rodriguez being confronted by hostile group. Need backup now. The message was simple but carried the urgency that special operations personnel understood implicitly. When one of their own called for assistance, response was immediate and overwhelming. Meanwhile, the confrontation continued to escalate as Brooks and his supporters grew bolder in their verbal attacks. The circle around Maria's table had tightened, creating an increasingly intimidating environment that bordered on harassment. Other diners watched nervously, unsure whether to intervene or remain observers to the developing drama. You want to talk about standards? Brooks continued, his voice carrying across the now silent chow hall. Real standards mean earning respect through service, not having it handed to you because of politics and quotas. Some of us actually work for our assignments instead of getting them gift-wrapped because of our gender. Maria remained standing, refusing to be intimidated into sitting back down but also avoiding any aggressive movements that could be misinterpreted. Her military training had prepared her for many situations, but being surrounded by hostile personnel in what should have been a safe environment was testing her composure in unexpected ways. I've earned my position through the same standards applied to everyone else, she replied firmly. My security clearance, my training certifications, and my performance evaluations are all matters of record. If you have specific concerns about assignment procedures, there are appropriate channels for addressing them. Webb stepped closer, invading her personal space in a calculated move designed to provoke a reaction. Appropriate channels? That's military speak for shut up and accept whatever they tell you. We're tired of watching standards get lowered while being told it's progress. Some changes aren't improvements, they're just politics disguised as policy. The personal intimidation was crossing lines that Maria knew she couldn't ignore, but she also recognized that any physical response would be used against her. She was trapped between maintaining her dignity and avoiding actions that could be characterized as aggressive or inappropriate. The situation demanded careful navigation that was becoming increasingly difficult as the group's behavior grew more threatening. Santos had positioned himself near the entrance, monitoring the situation while waiting for backup. He knew that direct intervention by a single person could escalate the confrontation rather than resolve it. However, he also knew that the SEAL community's response would be swift and decisive once his teammates received his message. The first to respond was Chief Petty Officer Michael "Brick" Rodriguez, a weapons specialist with 12 years of SEAL experience and a reputation for unwavering loyalty to his team members. Rodriguez had been reviewing mission equipment when he received Santos' text, and he immediately abandoned his work to respond to the call for assistance. His understanding was simple: someone was threatening a member of their extended team, and that required immediate action. Rodriguez entered the chow hall and quickly located Santos, who pointed toward the developing confrontation. Rodriguez's combat experience allowed him to instantly assess the tactical situation: multiple hostile personnel surrounding an isolated friendly, with limited escape routes and a crowd of potential witnesses. His approach would need to be controlled but unmistakably authoritative. "What's the situation?" Rodriguez whispered to Santos as he approached. 8 hostiles surrounding Rodriguez. Verbal harassment escalating to intimidation. "She's holding her own, but they're testing boundaries," Santos replied quietly, using the tactical communication style that allowed for rapid information transfer. Rodriguez nodded and began moving toward the confrontation, his presence immediately noticeable to anyone with military experience. Special operations personnel carried themselves differently, with confidence, awareness, and an unmistakable aura of competence that came from years of elite training and successful missions. As Rodriguez approached, other SEAL team members began arriving in response to the alert. Petty Officer 2nd Class Jake Hammer Williams, an explosive ordnance specialist, entered from the side entrance. Staff Sergeant Tony Viper Martinez, a sniper with 8 confirmed kills, appeared near the serving line. One by one, elite operators filtered into the Chow Hall, their arrival creating a shift in the atmosphere that even civilian observers would have noticed. Brooks was so focused on his verbal assault against Maria that he initially failed to notice the changing dynamics in the room. His supporters were beginning to look nervous as they recognized the distinctive bearing of special operations personnel, but Brooks continued his aggressive monologue, apparently believing that his numerical advantage and public setting provided protection from consequences. "The truth is," Brooks continued loudly, "some people get opportunities they don't deserve while others who've earned recognition get overlooked. It's not about qualifications, it's about politics and appearances. That's what's really happening here, and everyone knows it even if they're afraid to say it publicly." The accusation was serious enough to demand a response, but Maria was increasingly aware that anything she said would be used against her regardless of its accuracy or appropriateness. She was beginning to feel genuinely threatened by the group's behavior, which had evolved from verbal harassment to physical intimidation through their positioning and aggressive body language. Chief Rodriguez had heard enough. He approached the group with the measured confidence of someone accustomed to taking charge in difficult situations. His voice carried the authority of rank and experience when he spoke, cutting through the tension like a blade. "Gentlemen," Rodriguez said, the single word containing volumes of meaning to anyone familiar with military hierarchy and special operations culture. "I think this conversation has run its course. Perhaps it's time to return to your assigned duties." Brooks turned toward the interruption, initially annoyed at the intervention but quickly recognizing the insignia and bearing of a special operations professional. His momentary confusion gave Rodriguez the opening he needed to continue speaking with calm authority. "Rodriguez is one of our intelligence specialists," the chief explained to the group, his tone suggesting that further explanation should be unnecessary. "Her work directly supports mission success and operator safety. I'm sure you understand the importance of maintaining unit cohesion and mutual respect among all personnel." The statement was delivered with professional courtesy but carried unmistakable implications about the consequences of continued harassment. Rodriguez wasn't making threats, he was stating facts about military culture and the protection that special operations communities provided to their members. Brooks, however, was too committed to his confrontation to back down gracefully. His audience was watching, his supporters were depending on him, and his ego wouldn't allow him to be dismissed by an intervention that highlighted his junior status. "With all due respect, Chief," Brooks replied, his tone carrying a challenging edge that surprised even his own supporters, "this is a conversation between Navy personnel about Navy policies. We have a right to express our opinions about assignments and standards, especially when they affect mission readiness and unit effectiveness." The challenge was poorly calculated. Brooks had just questioned the authority of a senior special operations professional in a public setting, suggesting that his opinions about military policy carried equal weight with those of someone who had dedicated his career to elite service. The miscalculation would prove costly as more SEAL team members continued arriving in response to Santos' alert. Lieutenant Commander Thompson appeared at the main entrance, followed by 2 additional team leaders who had been in a planning session when the alert reached them. Their arrival brought the total number of special operations personnel in the Chow Hall to 8, with more likely on the way. The balance of power in the room was shifting dramatically. Rodriguez maintained his professional demeanor despite Brooks' challenge. You absolutely have the right to express opinions through appropriate channels, he agreed. However, what I'm observing appears to be harassment rather than constructive policy discussion. Perhaps we can redirect this energy toward more productive venues. The suggestion was reasonable and offered Brooks an opportunity to withdraw gracefully, but his commitment to the confrontation had passed the point of rational decision-making. He interpreted the intervention as validation of his complaints about special treatment and protection rather than recognition of standard military protocol for addressing conflicts. Harassment? Brooks repeated incredulously. We're having a conversation about military standards and assignment policies. If discussing these issues is considered harassment, then maybe that proves our point about special treatment and protected status. Webb and several other members of Brooks' group began looking uncomfortable with the escalating confrontation. What had started as an opportunity to challenge perceived unfairness was evolving into a direct confrontation with the special operations community. They had signed up to complain about policies, not to challenge elite warriors in a public setting. Santos moved to position himself where he could better observe both groups while maintaining communication with the arriving SEAL personnel. The tactical situation was evolving rapidly, and coordination among the responding operators was essential to prevent further escalation while protecting their teammate. Maria found herself in an increasingly surreal situation. What had begun as a routine lunch had transformed into a standoff between junior enlisted personnel and some of the most elite warriors in the military. She appreciated the support but was also concerned about the potential consequences for everyone involved if the situation continued to escalate. Perhaps we should all take a step back, Maria suggested, trying to de-escalate the confrontation before it reached a point of no return. This kind of public disagreement serves no constructive purpose and reflects poorly on all of us regardless of our different perspectives. Her suggestion was reasonable, but Brooks had invested too much in the confrontation to accept a diplomatic resolution. He had challenged authority figures and made accusations that couldn't be simply withdrawn without losing face in front of his supporters and the growing audience of base personnel. Thompson approached Rodriguez and spoke quietly, assessing the situation and coordinating response with his senior enlisted leader. As the ranking officer present, Thompson had responsibility for managing the confrontation in a way that maintained discipline while protecting personnel under his command. The lieutenant commander's arrival marked another escalation in the institutional response to the harassment of a team member. Brooks and his supporters were no longer facing individual operators, they were confronting the collective leadership of multiple special operations teams who had responded to protect one of their own. The Chow Hall had become completely silent except for the quiet conversations among SEAL personnel as they coordinated their response. Other diners watched with fascination and growing concern as the confrontation took on dimensions that none of them had anticipated when it began. Unknown to everyone present, word of the developing situation had reached the base command structure. Military installations had protocols for managing conflicts that threatened to disrupt unit cohesion, and the public nature of this confrontation was triggering responses at multiple levels of command. The stage was set for a resolution that would define relationships and establish boundaries that would influence military culture long after the immediate confrontation was resolved. Lieutenant Commander Thompson stepped forward with the measured authority that came from leading men through life-or-death situations. His presence immediately shifted the dynamic in the Chow Hall, as everyone present recognized the institutional weight he carried. Thompson wasn't just another operator, he was a senior leader whose word carried the authority of the entire special operations community. "Gentlemen," Thompson began, his voice carrying clearly across the silent room, "I want to make something very clear to everyone present. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez is not just an intelligence specialist, she's a member of our operational team. Her analysis and support have contributed directly to mission success and operator safety. When you question her qualifications or suggest she doesn't belong here, you're questioning our professional judgment and the standards we maintain." The statement carried implications that extended far beyond the immediate confrontation. Thompson was establishing that attacks on Maria constituted attacks on the SEAL community itself, and that such challenges would not be tolerated from personnel who lacked the credentials to make such judgments. Brooks found himself facing a choice between backing down or escalating his challenge to include senior special operations leadership. His supporters were beginning to understand the magnitude of what they had initiated, and several were already looking for opportunities to distance themselves from the confrontation without appearing to abandon their colleague. "Sir," Brooks replied, attempting to maintain his position while showing appropriate military courtesy, "we're not questioning your professional judgment. We're discussing policies about assignment procedures and whether certain considerations beyond qualifications might influence personnel decisions." "That seems like a legitimate topic for discussion among service members." Thompson nodded thoughtfully, acknowledging the attempt at a more respectful tone while maintaining his position. "You're absolutely right that assignment policies are appropriate topics for discussion. However, public harassment of individual service members is not an appropriate way to conduct that discussion. If you have concerns about assignment procedures, there are proper channels for addressing them." The lieutenant commander's response offered Brooks a face-saving exit from the confrontation while making clear that continued harassment would not be tolerated. Thompson was demonstrating the leadership skills that had earned him command of elite warriors, offering dignity to opponents while maintaining firm boundaries about acceptable behavior. However, the situation was further complicated by the continued arrival of additional SEAL personnel. Word of the confrontation had spread through the special operations community with the speed that characterized all communication among elite units. Operators from multiple teams were appearing in the Chow Hall, creating an overwhelming show of force that transformed the nature of the confrontation entirely. Petty Officer First Class Marcus Steele Johnson, a communications specialist with 10 years of SEAL experience, entered with 3 additional teammates. Behind them came Staff Sergeant Carlos Razor Fernandez, a demolitions expert whose reputation for protecting team members was legendary throughout the special operations community. The arrival of each additional operator sent a clear message about the unity and loyalty that characterized the SEAL Brotherhood. Maria watched with amazement as more operators continued arriving. She had known intellectually that military units protected their members, but witnessing the practical reality of that protection was both humbling and overwhelming. These men were risking their own careers and reputations to support someone they had known for less than a month, demonstrating a level of loyalty that exceeded anything she had previously experienced. Brooks and his remaining supporters found themselves facing nearly 30 special operations personnel, a response that exceeded anything they had anticipated when the confrontation began. What had started as an attempt to challenge one individual had evolved into a direct confrontation with the most elite warriors on the base, and the outcome was becoming increasingly apparent to everyone involved. Chief Rodriguez stepped closer to Brooks, speaking quietly enough that only the immediate participants could hear his words. "Son, you're facing a decision point here. You can continue this confrontation and face the consequences, or you can recognize that you've misunderstood the situation and take appropriate action to correct it. I'm offering you an opportunity to handle this professionally." The offer was generous considering the circumstances, and Rodriguez was demonstrating the leadership and judgment that had earned him advancement through the special operations ranks. He was providing Brooks with a dignified exit from a situation that could only end badly if it continued to escalate. Webb and 2 other members of Brooks' group quietly stepped away from the confrontation, recognizing that their participation was no longer sustainable given the overwhelming response from the special operations community. Their withdrawal left Brooks increasingly isolated, supported only by a few individuals who were too committed to back down gracefully. Thompson decided that the situation required definitive resolution before it escalated beyond the point where military discipline could address it effectively. He stepped forward and addressed the entire gathering, establishing the official position that would guide subsequent actions. "Ladies and gentlemen," Thompson announced, "this situation is concluded. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez has the full support of the special operations community, and any further harassment will be addressed through appropriate military channels. I encourage everyone to return to their assigned duties and remember that unit cohesion depends on mutual respect and professional behavior." The announcement carried the weight of formal military authority and represented an official position that would be enforced through the chain of command. Brooks and his supporters were being given a final opportunity to withdraw from the confrontation without facing formal disciplinary action, but continued defiance would trigger institutional responses that could affect their military careers. Most of the remaining members of Brooks' group accepted the opportunity to leave gracefully, understanding that further confrontation served no constructive purpose and carried significant risks for their continued military service. They began dispersing quietly, avoiding eye contact with the special operations personnel while trying to maintain whatever dignity the situation allowed. Brooks, however, had invested too much in the confrontation to accept defeat gracefully. His ego and his audience demanded some form of final statement that would allow him to maintain face among his supporters, even if the practical outcome was already determined. "This isn't over," Brooks said loudly enough for the room to hear. "Policies and standards are still legitimate topics for discussion, and concerned service members have rights to express their opinions about matters that affect military readiness and effectiveness." The statement was technically accurate but missed the essential point that Thompson and his operators had been making. Military personnel did have rights to express opinions about policies, but those rights didn't extend to public harassment of individual service members, especially those whose performance had earned the respect of elite units. Chief Rodriguez stepped forward one final time, his voice carrying the finality of someone who had reached the end of his patience with diplomatic solutions. "Recruit Brooks, you're absolutely right that you have rights to express opinions about military policies. However, you do not have the right to harass individual service members in public settings. This conversation is over. Any further harassment of Staff Sergeant Rodriguez or any other member of our team will be addressed through formal disciplinary channels." The use of Brooks' rank rather than his name carried additional meaning in military culture, emphasizing the hierarchy and experience gap between a junior recruit and senior special operations professionals. Rodriguez was reminding everyone present that military experience and proven performance carried weight in evaluating the credibility of different perspectives. Brooks realized that continued confrontation would only damage his position further. The overwhelming response from the special operations community had demonstrated that Maria enjoyed protection and support that extended far beyond what he had anticipated. His attempt to isolate and intimidate her had instead revealed the strength of the bonds that connected elite military units. "Understood, Chief," Brooks replied, his tone carrying resignation rather than continued defiance. He turned and walked away from the confrontation, followed by his remaining supporters who were eager to escape the attention of 30 special operations professionals who had gathered to protect their teammate. As Brooks and his group left the Chow Hall, the assembled SEAL personnel began to disperse gradually. Their mission had been accomplished, they had demonstrated that attacks on their team members would not be tolerated, and they had established boundaries that would prevent similar confrontations in the future. Thompson approached Maria, who remained standing near her table, still processing the overwhelming show of support she had just witnessed. The lieutenant commander's expression showed both professional concern and personal respect for how she had handled the difficult situation. "Rodriguez," Thompson said quietly, "you handled that professionally under difficult circumstances. However, I want you to understand something important. You're not facing these challenges alone. You're part of our team, and we protect our teammates. That's how this community works, and it always will be." Maria felt emotions threatening to overwhelm her professional composure. The support demonstration had exceeded anything she could have imagined, revealing a level of acceptance and protection that validated every sacrifice she had made to earn her place in the special operations community. "Thank you, sir," she replied, her voice carrying the depth of gratitude that simple words couldn't fully express. "I appreciate the support more than you can know. It means everything to know that I have teammates who will stand with me when things get difficult." Santos approached and offered his perspective on what had just transpired. "Rodriguez, what you witnessed here today is what brotherhood looks like in the special operations community. We don't care about gender, race, religion, or political views. We care about competence, dedication, and loyalty to the team. You've demonstrated all of those qualities, which makes you one of us." The explanation helped Maria understand the deeper significance of what had occurred. The response hadn't been about protecting a woman from harassment, it had been about protecting a team member who had earned her place through performance and dedication. The distinction was important because it validated her achievements rather than suggesting she needed special protection due to her gender. Chief Rodriguez provided additional context that would help Maria navigate future challenges. "What happened here today sends a message throughout the base community. Word will spread that you have the full support of the special operations community, and that should prevent similar situations from developing. However, if anyone does test these boundaries again, you know how to reach us. The practical implications were significant. Military bases were small communities where news traveled quickly, and the overwhelming response to harassment of the intelligence specialist would be discussed and analyzed throughout the installation. The message was clear: Maria enjoyed the protection of the most elite warriors on the base, and challenges to her presence would be met with decisive resistance. Over the following days, the effects of the Chow Hall confrontation rippled through the base community in ways that exceeded everyone's expectations. Brooks and his supporters found themselves isolated and facing informal sanctions from personnel who disapproved of their behavior. Military culture placed high value on unit cohesion and mutual support, and their public harassment of a team member violated fundamental principles that most service members held sacred. More importantly, Maria's integration into the special operations community accelerated dramatically. The public demonstration of support had established her status in ways that months of professional performance might not have achieved. She was no longer the new intelligence specialist trying to earn acceptance, she was a protected member of an elite brotherhood that had publicly demonstrated its loyalty to her. The relationships she had been carefully building with individual operators evolved into genuine friendships based on mutual respect and shared commitment to mission success. Operators who had maintained professional distance began including her in informal conversations and social activities that built the personal connections essential for effective teamwork. Lieutenant Commander Thompson used the incident as a teaching moment for his entire command, emphasizing the importance of judging teammates based on performance rather than demographics. The special operations community had always prided itself on meritocracy, and Maria's situation provided an opportunity to reinforce those values while demonstrating practical commitment to protecting all team members. The confrontation had also revealed important information about base culture and the challenges facing military integration efforts. While the vast majority of personnel supported professional standards and respectful treatment of all service members, a vocal minority harbored resentments that could create problems if not addressed proactively. Commander Mitchell used the incident to review base policies and procedures for addressing harassment and discrimination. The public nature of the confrontation had highlighted gaps in prevention and response mechanisms that needed to be addressed to maintain unit cohesion and mission effectiveness. For Maria, the experience marked a turning point in her military career and personal development. She had faced significant adversity and emerged with the support and respect of the elite community she served. The confidence that came from knowing she belonged and was protected allowed her to focus completely on her mission without the energy-draining concern about acceptance and legitimacy. The bonds forged in that Chow Hall would endure throughout her continued service with the special operations community. She had learned that military brotherhood transcended traditional boundaries when it was based on competence, dedication, and mutual support. The 30 elite warriors who had responded to protect her had demonstrated the true meaning of the military family, a commitment to standing together regardless of the challenges they faced. Years later, when Maria achieved senior leadership positions of her own, she would remember the lesson taught by those SEAL operators who rose to back her when she needed support most. Military service was about more than individual achievement, it was about belonging to something larger than yourself and knowing that your teammates would move mountains to protect you when the situation demanded it.